we're going to talk about now, I'm going to give you a little quick demo of our ICD-10 features. So we're actually going to jump into the program so that you don't have to just see the screenshots, but you can see what we have available and how to set those up in versions 19 and 20. So the first thing I'm going to look at is if you go to your insurance carrier list and you were to edit one of your insurance carriers, you'll see that on the Options and Codes tab, you can now set the ICD-10 or set the ICD version. So you could either set it to ICD-9 or ICD-10, and you can set an effective date. Now, I actually set this one up. Typically, your effective date would, of course, be October 1st, 2015. For this particular carrier, I've set it for January 1st because I want to show you some of those ICD warnings. But that is where you would set your effective date if you know it was a carrier that's going to ICD-10. And for those carriers that you might not have the information like your work comp or auto injury, you can simply set them to be ICD-9. Now again, you don't have to edit. Most of you don't have a short list like this. Most of you have an extensive list, so you do not have to edit those one by one. If you go to your Tools menu and you go down to Services, you're going to find your Set ICD Version utility. So in this window at the bottom, you can say, hey, I want to, let's just say, sorry, up here, I'm going to go ahead and set my ICD code set to be ICD-10. And then I'm going to set the effective date for that to be October 1st, 2015. And then I can either choose to go ahead and select all my carriers for that, or again, there is that option for if you click on type, it's going to sort by type. So you could get all of your work comps together and then just uncheck the ones that you did not, that you are not going to be setting to ICD-10. And I'm going to actually set everybody except for our Aetna here to have that October 1st, 2015 date. So I'm going to go ahead and say update selected. We can also pretend that, you know, we had a whole group of work comps that we're going to set to ICD-9 with no ICD-10 effective date. So I'm going to update that. So just in a few clicks, you should be able to update all of your insurance carriers with the ICD-10 effective date. I'm going to go ahead and close out of there. I'm also going to, let's talk about the diagnosis setup. So I'm going to go to my diagnosis code list up here. If you are not new to Medisoft, if you converted from a previous version, then ideally you're going to still have all of your ICD-9 codes in here, and the ICD-10 and ICD-10 descriptions are going to be blank. We have had some issues in some of the conversions where the ICD-10 field and description are filled out with the ICD-9, so it actually is showing that the ICD-10 code is the equivalent of what you already have set up in ICD-9. If you find that that's the case in your system, my recommendation would be to contact support. They can run a utility that will clear out the ICD-10 fields, and I would recommend doing that before you start making any changes for ICD-10, because if you don't, then the ICD warnings that I talked about are not actually going to work for you, because it doesn't know if the code is a valid code or not. It simply just knows if you filled out an ICD-10 code or you have not filled out an ICD-10 code. So we would want that to be blank if it wasn't a valid ICD-10 code for any of your existing diagnosis codes. So if you are creating a new code, you can see now, I'm just going to set up a new code right here. So if you're brand new to the system, don't have any codes, and want to kind of build your own library or start adding codes on your own, I would recommend for code, since code is what you're going to see when you're entering in your transactions, if we're going to rip off the Band-Aid and learn ICD-10, I'm going to go ahead and set up code as my ICD-10 code. So I'm going to add a code for nausea with vomiting, and I'm going to put in the code right there, the ICD-10 code, nausea with vomiting. And then I'm going to go ahead and copy both that code and description down to my ICD-10 field. I'm going to go ahead and hit copy here too because I want to get that same description, but I am going to remove my ICD-9 code and enter in what I would build as today if I were billing it today under ICD-9. So this is my mapping back to ICD-9. Okay, so that's how you can set up a new code. And remember this top section right here, since this is really just a user-defined code, you may find instances where maybe you have to have multiple mappings for certain ones. You can add on little characters like A or B or whatever. You can name things whatever you want on the code section at the top. The important thing is when we use this code, what do we, if we need to build out under ICD-10, what are we going to have it send? And if we build out under ICD-9, what would be its equivalent? Okay. So that's how you can kind of set up a new code or even edit some of your existing codes if you want to manage the mappings on your own. I'm now going to show you the new ICD-10 mapping utility that will help you build that library without having to manually do it. So again, if you go up to your tools and then services, we have this create ICD-10 mappings utility right here. When you open it up, there's some basic instructions. We're just simply reminders that, hey, this is not going to be maybe catch everything that you need, but it's going to give you a great head start because we're using the gems that were published by CMS. So it's, again, if you have no ICD-9 codes already set up in your system, this tool is not going to do anything for you. But for those practices that are converting, have been on Medisoft in prior years, if you go to your one-to-one mappings, it's going to look at the ICD-9s that you have set up in the system already. And based off of that, if there is a what they call the one-to-one match, then it's going to suggest those codes for you. Now, this is a great time to clean up codes. A lot of the offices that I've helped convert, as we're going through this, are like, I don't even use half these codes anymore. If you don't use them anymore, then you're probably not going to use them under ICD-10 either, so just don't convert them. And it's something you can either do all at once, just saying, I'm just going to do everything I've got in my system and maybe just review the ones I don't want to do. Or if you do want to review them individually, you can just individually check them off. You'll notice that when I check it off for new code, it's going to create a new code with the ICD-10 code as the code. So I'm just going to do one of them to show you how that works. And I'm going to tell it, go ahead and just create that selected code. So we're doing chickenpox right here, was my previous description. You'll notice that it removes that from my one-to-one mapping list. So if I decide to come back later and work on this later, I don't have to remember whether or not I've already created the code for that. It's already removed it from the list for me. So I'm going to jump out of my mapping tool and go back up to my diagnosis list here. You'll see that chickenpox was not removed. So the original one that I had set up with my ICD-9 is still on my list. I'm actually going to turn off the display ICD-9 and just show me ones that have ICD-10 codes. This is the code that it actually created for me, the mapping for that one, the 052.9. So you can see it created a brand new code that had the that is going to allow me to start learning ICD-10, but it still mapped back to my old chickenpox code. Chickenpox just happened to be the description that I had in it before, not what the maybe technical term for it was. You could always edit or change that if you needed to. So you do have a choice as you're starting to learn that. I can still use this old code if I want to because I'm not ready for ICD-10 yet, or I can start using that new one, and I'm going to kind of show you a demo of how to do that. If you're ready to start converting and just using your new codes, you can also come in here and just make your code inactive if that's one that you're no longer going to use. Okay? So that's the one-to-one mappings. If you go back to your tools and services and you create ICD-10 mappings, that we also have the other mappings. And this, again, is looking at all of your codes that are available under ICD-9 and your diagnosis list. And it's going to suggest, based off of that, the mappings. And there are some times where there's not a one-to-one match. So you can see, like strep throat, for example, there's two different types of strep throat codes under ICD-10. Some of them are just going to be 2 or 3 or 10. Some of them, like if you look down here at insect bite, there's hundreds of codes. That what used to be one code under ICD-9 is Remember, ICD-10 is a lot more specific. So what if I go ahead and tell it to create these codes, it would create one for each and every one of these. And each and every one of these would be mapped back to the same ICD-9 code. So again, I could start billing with them today, but my claim's going to go out with the ICD-9 based off what I have set up for my insurance. So that's our nice little ICD-10 mapping tool, again, that's available for you in the system. The next thing I'm going to show you is transaction entry, the warnings that you'll get in transaction entry as you're starting to implement your ICD-10 codes, and even what you'll see after October 1st if you try to use a code that isn't mapped properly. So I'm going to go into transaction entry here, and I have 3 different scenarios that we're going to work. The first one I'm going to do is we're going to do Dwight again, who has Medicare. And if you look at my Medicare setup, I have Medicare set so that the effective date for ICD-10 is not until October 1st, 2015. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to enter in my procedure, my 99213. I'm going to go over to my diagnosis field. You'll notice on your drop-down for your diagnosis field now you can see, if you're selecting a code, which ones have the just an ICD-9 mapped versus no ICD-10 and so on and so forth. Little shortcut, if you're not already aware, you can hit F6 while you're in a diagnosis field, and that will open up your full search window where you can take advantage of some of those more advanced search capabilities. I'm going to go ahead and do just my ICD-10 codes, and we're going to use that nausea with vomiting one. So remember, I'm going to enter in these charges today. The effective date for ICD-10 is not until October 1st, but this particular code that I'm using does have an ICD-9 map to it, so I could start to learn my ICD-10 code. So I'm going to go ahead and create that one and then save that transaction right there. All right. The next scenario that I'm going to do, let's just do Andrew Austin here. Andrew Austin, if you look at his case, he has as a policy 1 workers' compensation, and that workers' compensation, if I look at that, is set so that it's only going to bill ICD-9s on it. I also have for him a secondary insurance, so if I'm unable to collect anything from workers' comp and I am billing a secondary insurance, I have Medicare set up for my secondary, and again, if I look at my Medicare, then depending on when I bill this, my Medicare may need the ICD-10 required on it. So again, just to illustrate that you could have 2 different insurances that have 2 different requirements for which version of ICD-10 code or ICD code you're going to use, but you still have the luxury, if you set it up so that they're mapped properly, of just having to learn. And I'm going to do that same thing. Let's just do my R11. So there's my nausea with vomiting that has both the ICD-9 and the ICD-10. So even though I'm going to see the ICD-10 on this and it needs to go to a work comp is going to pull, that insurance is going to pull the ICD-9 onto the claim. So I'm going to go ahead and save that one, and we'll look at it when we send our claims. And then the last one I'm going to do here is I've got an insurance Aetna, and just for the sake of kind of demoing the diagnosis warning that you're going to get or you can get, I set Aetna with an effective date of January 1st for ICD-10. So just, I'm simulating that they require an ICD-10 code right now, even though that's obviously not the case. You may need to do this, though, when you're testing, change the ICD version temporarily so that you could maybe send some test claims. So I'm going to do 99213 on here, and then I'm just going to select a code right here that does not have, so you saw there's no ICD-10 field mapped to this code. So you can see as I'm going through, it's changing that code, highlighting it in red to let me know. You know, and I could at that point, if I wanted to edit and add an ICD-10 mapping, if there was one, that would help me get past that diagnosis warning, or obviously switch it to a code that was properly mapped, maybe the ICD-10 that was mapped back to this 005.9. For sake of showing you what would happen if I ignore that error message, I'm going to go ahead and save this transaction. You can see it's telling me that, hey, the code you're using is not properly mapped for the primary insurance. You still want to go ahead and save this transaction. I'm going to say yes, because now I've entered in 3 charges. We're going to close out of here, and we're going to go into claim management so you can see the result of all those different scenarios that we've built. So I'm going to go ahead and create my claims right here, and I'm just going to leave everything blank so it'll just create any of those new ones. And you can see there's 3 that were created that are ready. These 2 are ready to send. And then again, my one patient that I had set up for Aetna with the date effective of January 1st, it went straight to diagnosis warning. So it's not going to allow me to send this claim without knowing that if I send this claim, it's not going to pull any diagnosis because the field that it's looking for is empty. And if you go to the transaction tab, because you could have several different diagnoses on this, the diagnosis that we have that Medisoft has an issue with is going to be highlighted there in red. So some fail-safe, warnings are built into the system for you. Okay, I'm not even going to try to send that claim, but what I am going to show you in these other 2 scenarios, we use the same ICD-10 code R11.2 mapped back to a proper ICD-9 and mapped obviously to that same ICD-10. One of them should pull on the ICD-9 code. One of them should pull on, actually, sorry, this one won't pull on ICD-10 quite yet. Okay, so I messed that up. Let me actually go back into to John right here. In this case, I'm going to go ahead and do my R11.2 so I can fix my diagnosis problem. I'm going to save that transaction. And then I'm going to, so because this one has the effective date of January 1st, we're going to recreate that claim. It deleted my one with the diagnosis warning because I changed the diagnosis code, so I'm going to recreate it. There we go. So this one, because now we have our 3 perfect scenarios. This Medicare one should not pull. It should pull an ICD-9 code today because the effective date for ICD-10 is not set until October 1st, 2015. This one should pull an ICD-9 just because that's all that it's set to pull, and then this one should go ahead and pull an ICD-10 today because I set the effective date early. So I'm only just going to print the claim just so that you can see. Obviously, hopefully all of you are doing electronic claims and stuff like that, but at least we can visually see if I print it what this is going to do. So I'm going to do the new form right here. We're going to say OK, and we'll just preview it to the screen. And go ahead and say OK to that. Let me pull this over and maybe make it a little bit larger so you can see. So again, Dwight again was set with Medicare. We entered in the ICD-10 code, but the ICD-10 code was mapped to this ICD-9. Since our effective date has not occurred yet, it pulled the ICD-9 code onto the claim. In our second scenario, workers' compensation, again, it pulled the ICD-9, and I'm not going to illustrate this, but if my secondary insurance needed the ICD-10, I think you get the idea. It's going to pull the ICD-10 onto the claim. And then my third scenario, Aetna, I set the effective date as January 1st, so it did pull the ICD-10 onto the claim. All using that same code, I was able to meet all of my billing scenarios without me having to go do a bunch of manipulation in the system to remember any of that. So that's the good news is hopefully the tools are in place to help you as you are preparing now to train your office and staff and everything and to start implementing ICD-10 now, you can go ahead and start making those changes, and the system's going to help you through that transition, knowing which code set to pull onto the claim itself. So that ends our demo. The last solution to talk about is the whole replacing your Superbill with an electronic Superbill. So because the paper Superbill just may not be feasible for your practice anymore if you're still using a paper Superbill, we do have solutions in place for you. Medisoft Mobile being one of them. If you're not familiar with that on the new versions you do have the capability of using a smartphone or an iPad to see your schedule and enter in charges. So that, again, can kind of expand. Instead of just having one page, you can expand the capability for you to store more codes. The other option that we have for you is our EHR solutions. And we are going to actually hold another webinar in our ICD-10 series that discusses the EHR solutions, not only how they can help you eliminate superbills, but some of the other benefits of EHR that will help you with the ICD-10 transition, and that can also help you with some of the other regulatory programs that are happening right now that may be impacting your reimbursements. So if you're not signed up for that, look forward to that webinar. Thank you for joining us today. If you do have additional questions, you can call us at 877-544-4433. You can also visit us at our blog. That's the best place for you to go, where we're keeping you updated on all the changes as they occur. You can go to that blog and sign up to be on our email list. So if you don't want to check the blog all the time, if you subscribe to the blog, every time we post to it, you'll get a notification of what the article is about. We do put support tips and tricks, any regulatory changes, any new versions, updates, bugs, anything, all goes to that blog. So, and then again, we have a few more webinars coming up in our ICD-10 series that have to do with testing and with our EHR solutions and all around things that are going to help you with the ICD-10 transition. So if you're not already signed up for those, please look forward to the email invitations so that you can join us for those. Thanks again for being with us today. Look forward to seeing you again.